Greetings to all those who are confined behind the walls of their homes, like me. Welcome to Groove with Portia, QuaranTOLD Edition. I'm your host, Portia Booker, and yes, this is my real name. Groove with Portia targets those who are curious, eager, and hungry for new information that can aid in their personal and professional development. Malcolm X once said, "Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today." Never stop learning. Be a sponge for the rest of your life. Before I jump into my topic for today, I want to introduce my guest who is joining me remotely. Welcome, Dr. Ebony. How are you, Dr. Ebony?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for agreeing to be my guest, because I know you probably get a lot of crazy inquiries, especially with the topic that we're going to talk about today, which I'm super excited. Like, you have no idea. No idea.
Well, I'm excited to talk about it too.
So I'm going to give our listeners a little bio on who Dr. Ebony is. So Dr. Ebony is a psychologist and creator of the My Therapy cards. She is passionate about helping women survivors thrive in trauma recovery. She is specifically trained to work with a variety of clients with issues related to depression, anxiety, and other stress responses. Dr. Ebony uses her training and expertise in the roles of food, relationship, and mindset strategist, host of the Food is Not Bae podcast, and also an author of the book called Food is Not Bae. So I'm very excited to have you, and to have you definitely talk about those My Therapy cards, because I'm just like, ooh.
Yes, I'm excited to be here and talk about it with you.
So Dr. Ebony, let's kind of like dive in. So how have the events, that have been going on, so just, the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and also COVID had an impact on you personally and professionally?
Yeah, it's been really tough. I will definitely say that as a person who sits in the healer space, it's been a lot to manage, and I've had to be super intentional about taking time for myself as I kind of pour into others, because I'm still human. I am a Black woman, and I'm experiencing this, which is so interesting, at the same time that my clients are experiencing it. And so we'll be sitting in session, and my personal self is just kind of like, just pull myself together so that I can come to this session. And then hearing them talk about it is re-triggering for me. So I'm having to be intentional about the coping skills that I'm even using in that moment. And I'll tell my clients, I was like, do you see me taking a lot of breaths? And they'll say, yeah. I was like, that's because I'm managing my own nervous system right now. And these are the things that I'm also asking you to do, or encouraging you to do, so that you learn how to manage yours. And we just kind of sit in that together. And there have been many a times where I just was like, I'm just not going to allow myself to cry right now. I need to just kind of hold it together for them, because this is really tough. And then just being really transparent has been healing, I think, for me and clients, to talk about ways that is definitely impacting us, and say, hey, this is definitely sad. And it brings me to tears, like, really. And so I found myself clenching my teeth a lot, so having a lot of anxiety. I found myself being really tense in my shoulders, not sleeping really well, waking up in the middle of the night. I've had to put my own limits around social media engagement, making sure that I'm intentional about moving my body, because I think that that's a way for me to kind of move some of the energy around that I'm feeling. So I've had to sit in both the therapist and client space, to be honest, to process the things that are happening around all of this, because I don't think anybody can escape it. And definitely at the beginning of when COVID, I think we all ran into overdrive, and we were like, okay, let me put together a workshop to teach you how to deal with stress. Let me put together this so that you know this, and just over giving of coping skills so that people would be okay. And that definitely takes a toll. So at one point, I think it was the beginning of second week in June, I took the entire week off, and I was just like, I just need a break to where I'm not dealing with anybody else's issues but my own.
I mean, you touched on a lot, especially the fact that you had to both be a therapist and a client at the same time. And considering that you are a healer for so many people, it's like people have to remember that healers are people too.
Most certainly. And I think we have to remember that we are people too, because we have to make sure that we are intentional about filling ourselves back up. And I think that we are the hardest people to follow our own lessons. Like, we are the hardest people to teach, actually, because we don't want to listen. And we think that we can keep going. We think that we can keep going. And we're like, no, we actually need to take a break and do what we're encouraging our clients to do. And that can be really difficult for people, especially people who are like, used to being the go-to person. It's like you just have to recognize when your cup is empty, like your tank is empty. You just need to take a break to refill, because you're giving from an empty place versus kind of like a your filled up place, and that's not fair to you or anybody you're working with.
Well, I think too, Dr. Ebony, one of the things that I struggle with, and probably you as well, being a Black woman, and that guilt of we have to take care of everybody.
Oh, that blessing and a curse of being the strong one. Yeah, the strong Black woman, and being the nurturers, and just kind of like being conditioned and domesticated to be that way, and having to give ourselves permission to not be that. That's the toughest thing, is because then we have this kind of, we call it conviction, but it's actually really guilt. I'm glad that you named it as such, and having to fight through that guilt. And one of the things that I find myself doing is actually challenging. Does this guilt make sense? Is it valid? Have I done anything wrong by taking care of myself? Because guilt is only justified when you've done something against your morals, when you've done something to hurt somebody else, when the intention was there to harm someone. No, taking care of myself is not harmful. Taking care of myself is actually not, it doesn't go against my morals. What does, though, is continue to give out of a place that it does not honor me. And so honestly, that guilt does not fit. And so I need to change that emotion. Maybe I feel sad because I can't give. Maybe I feel sad because I'm not able to help right now, but the guilt is not justified. And helping to kind of work myself through that, and also helping my clients, other Black women, work through that guilt and just kind of come to a place where we're like, okay, we know we feel something, but guilt isn't the emotion that's going to help in this moment. It's not the emotion that is actually true. I know you feel it, but given the facts of the situation, it doesn't fit the emotion. And so what emotion might there be? Maybe there's fear that people are going to go without if you don't help. Maybe there's sadness. There are so many other emotions, but we're so used to feeling that guilt, and that guilt driving us, but it actually ends up being counterproductive for us.
I wonder why that is, Dr. Ebony, why as Black women we feel that it's like it's passed down.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say why? Because of white supremacy. I mean, because of the patriarchy, because of like all of these things, all of these systems, right? We are highly rewarded when we are nurturing other people. That's been in our blood. That's kind of like been in our lineage. Black women have held and kept things together, and that's been our praise, our claim to fame. That's the representation that we've seen on TV of Black women being nurturers. And so us stepping into this role is almost automatic. And so when we're in it, that's the representation that we see of ourselves just through our history. When we're doing anything other than that, we feel really guilty. And then we pack religion on top of that. And we're not serving other people. We're not being available to other people. And then you have that conviction there. And so it's just so many layers of systemic things that lead us to believe that we're doing something wrong if we're not nurturing somebody else. And I don't know anybody else other than Black women who are tasked with being nurturers. Women, yes, we are nurturers and providers, but Black women, we are given that task. We're given that as an expectation. Like that's who we should, that's our identity. Like people come to us to kind of like heal, like hold me in your arms, kind of like, just kind of like nurture me. People come to us to feel safe. Like we have that thing, right? And I think that a lot of us share that as an identity, but so many people have. I think white supremacy in the history of this world and country has shaped for us to be that and kind of reinforce that that's who we are. If you think about the mammy stereotype, the matriarch, and all of those, that's who Black women are. And then we are, many of our, I know my mom was kind of like the help. Her mom was the help. My friend's mom, they were the help. So this has been images and representation that we've seen. And that's who we are. I mean, we're domesticated in that way. If you think about the ways that little boys and girls are raised, little girls are raised to get married and take care of their family. Little boys are raised to be a provider and find a wife who does all those things, right? And so it's just so interwoven into so many contexts that it's hard to escape that reality or that identity. And then I can understand where that guilt comes from. So a lot of the work that I do with clients is really peeling that back and seeing, is that true for you? Does that feel like something you want to do, or does that feel like something you have to do? And so just kind of talking through what that means for them if they want to step outside of what is expected of them, and giving themselves permission to do so.
Well, and then too, I think when it comes to us being Black women, and also with having that quote unquote guilt feeling, I think it's because it's rewarding for us to help others. And then also we have to keep in mind that we can't keep giving out freebies and then, there's nothing left for us.
That's right. That's right. We have to take some for ourselves, and that's not selfish. That's not selfish at all. And that's why I know you'll get into this, but one of the reasons that I created the therapy cards is to help give people a voice and to do your own work, because we're so busy doing the work of everybody else all the time that we are not even allowing ourselves space to actually explore the things that we have going on. And when we aren't really sure about who we are, we can't show up and take up space. We don't really feel confident enough to do so. We don't feel empowered enough to do so. So if we do our own work, then you're like, well, yeah, I know that there are things that I do, but I also recognize that these are things that I'm working on, and I can shed that guilt. Guilt does not allow us to be progressive. It does not allow us to move forward. It does not allow us to grow. Guilt and shame keeps us in secrecy. It keeps us hidden. It keeps us in isolation. And how can we fight for causes or advocate for ourselves when we're guilt-ridden, when we're filled with shame? We can't. How can we do that when everything that comes up, we're like judging ourselves for? So we can't fight for the greater cause or advocate for ourselves to step into our power when we are so drowning in these emotions and these thoughts that kind of like we're doing something wrong or are wrong.
Well, then, like you said, it's one of those things that's ingrained in us. And now with the way society is, especially with social media being the way that it is, everything is out there. So it's even more so kind of like that being hit in the face all day by different forms of stimuli. Even outside of social media, you figure you go outside, you can just have on the wrong pair of jeans that somebody don't like.
Yeah, right.
And then you're like, oh, well, I didn't even think about it like that. But maybe you just, that person's just having a bad day. And you just like, look, I'm just getting dressed and going about my day.
Right. Going about my day. It's just always having to manage so much. And that is so heavy. That is really hard to have to always deal with, especially as Black women, because I think that if we were to talk about the whole colorism thing, right? Showing up with darker skin and just kind of showing up with larger bodies, we're always having to manage other people's perceptions of us and other people's issues with who we are, how we show up in the world, and we're always just having to deal with that. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting, but these are all the systemic things that are kind of going on. And then we got those internal things that are at play too.
Well, and then we have to also, we're our own worst enemy.
Oh, yeah.
That's the other problem too. It's like, me and you are having this great conversation about, being mindful and also, not feeling guilty, but then we get shamed into it when somebody else, our girlfriend, could be going through the exact same thing. Yeah. So it's like, where do you go?
It's hard to escape it. It is hard to escape it. But here's the thing that I find comforting to know is that if I do my work, I don't have to take on everything. If I do my work and I explore my limits and I explore my boundaries, then I can set those. And that's with other people. That's with managing social media expectations. That's with managing everybody else's expectations. That's with the words that I say to myself. And so when I do my own work, I can just become more aware of that, and I don't have to shoulder all of that all the time. But if I don't know that those things are at play, if I don't know that those things are happening, I'm always just in this chaos, living in this moment of crisis all the time because it is so heavy.
Yeah. And that's why I tell a lot of my friends, you need to detox from social media, detox from your phone, no computer, no email, no tablet, even people.
Yeah, even people. And that is hard for me to do. I'm not going to lie. Like when that week that I took off, I was still taking orders. And while I wasn't seeing clients, I was still managing orders and emailing people back. And it's very hard to shut the mind off. It is literally very hard to shut the mind off, and you have to make yourself do it. You're going to burn out. Like, it is really hard. And this is something that I'm even working on in therapy, is relinquishing control. Because this idea that if I'm not in control, then I'm not doing something well. And I'm supposed to be able to control everything. That's the whole dilemma of strong Black woman. And shedding that identity for yourself can be really, it can be a very sad process. It is filled with grief because you're shedding something, like you're kind of allowing yourself to let go of this idea of who you thought you were, this expectation, right? And so it's grieving the loss of something. Like, I don't have to be in control. I'm going to allow and kind of like let people do their thing, and I don't have to micromanage, and I'm just going to kind of like outsource things and like to let that go for something that is your baby, something that is so important to you, that can be hard and very scary. So it is difficult for people to kind of like shut everything down at once. So I always tell people, wean yourself into it. So if you're going to detox, start with, if you're going to do social media, just take the lowest hanging fruit and maybe you do social media detoxing for a day, a full 24 hours versus a full 7 days. Give yourself space to see a win and allow yourself to win, because I think that when we try to do too much at one time, we set ourselves up to feel like a failure because we're like, oh, I didn't do that right. And here's just another thing we didn't do well, right? No, just kind of like ease yourself into it so that you can see a win, and then you'll want to do more.
Absolutely. You touched on a lot, Dr. Ebony, and that's why I tell people I go on social media strike all the time. Like, you may see the little green, I'm on Facebook, but I'm not actively scrolling through my news feed. I'm checking messages. Like, I'm doing stuff for my show because I know how social media has an impact on me. So we've got a great conversation going on here, especially about, feeling guilty as a Black woman when we take on the whole world sometimes, right? Biting off more than what we can chew and working on changing our mindset, right? That's why I'm really having this conversation with Dr. Ebony, who's created this My Therapy cards, because I'm really stoked about talking about it, because I feel like that'll help us a little bit, be more self-sufficient, be more self-aware, and really kind of take our power back.
Yes, yes. And that's why it was created, so that we can dig deeper and realize and come to terms with things about ourselves that have been holding us back. Because I feel like when we don't know, we don't know what to fix. We don't know what to kind of work on. And I created these cards for people who may not actually be open to going to therapy, so that they can do their own self-exploration and begin to kind of work through some things. And if something comes out and you say that you have a hang up with forgiveness or a hang up with guilt, then maybe you can see this as a bridge to actually going into therapy. And you're like, okay, well, this isn't so bad. I'm not crazy because I feel like I have an issue with forgiveness. This is something that a lot of people deal with, and I don't have to worry about that stigma. I can find somebody who actually is specialized in working in forgiveness. And so not only are you understanding what your issues are, but you're now able to advocate for yourself from a power position. And you're able to go into the session with a voice, versus many times Black people showing up to the mental health system, Black people and other marginalized groups have not really felt like we've had a voice. It's always kind of been this huge power dynamic, this power differential of Black people, marginalized groups are inferior. The white man is, because mental health field, when I say the white man was largely created by white men. Mental health field, all of the theories, all of those have largely been white men dictating how mental health goes, mental health structure, what is appropriate, what is a diagnosis, all of these things. And so if we have this huge power disparity, then marginalized groups going in are going to be seen through a white lens. And so sometimes that can just feel very unwelcoming, because you're seeing me through how you see the world, not how through I see the world. And then that means that how I see the world could be problematic, and I don't really want to engage from that. And I see my work and also my therapy cards as giving clients a voice to be able to say, I know this is my issue. I know this is what I want to work on. Are you able to help me work on that? Instead of going in expecting the therapist to know everything and know how to exactly help them, but being able to advocate for themselves and say, no, I don't want to work on that. I want to work on this. I also created these cards for therapists to be able to work with clients of color in session, and all clients. Like, I created them specifically with Black people and people of color in mind, but all people can use them. And I think that sometimes we get stumped in therapy with as therapists, and clients can say, "Oh, I'm fine. I don't have anything going on. I'm okay." And this actually happened with one of my clients. So I pulled out the deck and I was like, "Oh, let us just see." And I said, "So I'm going to pull a card, and whatever card comes up, we're going to kind of explore that." And I think it was a habit one, like, what are you doing? What habits are you continuing to do that you know are no longer working for you? And they were like, "Oh, well." And I was like, "Oh, well, I thought everything was good. I thought we had reached the end, right?" And they were like, "Well, I really wasn't thinking about that." And so this helps to jog the memory, or kind of like get at those things that we may not feel like can be discussed in session. Because some people feel like, "Oh, I don't need to talk about a bad hair day that I had." No, that is what therapy is for. It is to process all of these things. It doesn't have to be a huge mental illness that we're talking about. We can talk about things that impact you and that are important to you. And so helping you find a voice to to say, hey, I want to talk about this and I think this is important. And for therapists to also say, well, let's see what this brings up for you, and how to, how can we work through that? And also being able to give clients in between session work so that clients can also be doing their work.
Dr. Ebony, how do these cards work? I mean, since we're already talking about it, is there cards for every single day of the week?
I'll show you. I know your audience can't see it, but I'll show you. So I'll describe it. So it comes in a tin, right? So it comes in a cute little tin, and then you open it up, and the cards there's a framework that I think is keeping us many times from achieving the growth and the elevation that we actually need, the changes that we want to see. And I think that that's mindset. So we have some mental blocks. We have some mindset things going on. We have some habits. So maybe we're engaging in habits that are no longer working for us, and we're getting stuck in the ways that we're coping with triggers. I think those three areas, when we are not kind of doing things in those areas to be effective, we remain stuck. So the card deck is separated into three categories: the mindset, habits, and triggers. And there are 12 cards per category. So the mindset category will ask you questions like, what do you want to forgive yourself for? And then there's a prompt at the top, and then there's a prompt at the top, and then a task at the bottom, right? And then it tells you what to do, because I've seen affirmation cards, I've seen self-care cards, and while I think those are helpful, I kind of feel like once you have the affirmation of, okay, I tell myself I'm beautiful in the morning, now what? Now what do I do? So I have these prompts that are at the top, and then a task at the bottom that says, okay, now journal. What is that you need to forgive yourself for? Talk with somebody you trust to see what is it that you are needing to work through. So like you can see it here. What do you need to forgive yourself for? And then at the bottom, there's a quote actually on this one that says, one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is to forgive yourself. And that's the Maya Angelou quote. And so basically just sitting with that, doing that work. And some will ask you to talk to somebody. Some will ask you to journal. Some will ask you to do something. And so the habit cards are kind of like, what habits are you engaging in that are getting in the way? What habits did you used to have that work that no longer work? And you're doing tasks around those too. And then we have trigger cards. And the trigger cards are things like, when I feel guilty, I respond by doing blank, fill in the blank. Or when I feel shameful, I cope by doing blank. And so basically it's getting you to tap into your emotions, getting you to tap into how they're connected to the things that you end up doing behaviorally or thinking. And so that you can gain insight, because if you're engaging in a behavior that you feel horrible about, well, we know that when I feel guilty, I engage in that behavior. So now that I know that that's a pattern for me, I can disrupt that pattern, because now I know the whole cycle. I know how it goes. And so now I can do something about it. And that's what awareness is. And so basically also giving people language to say, oh, I'm feeling shameful. I know when I start to feel ashamed, I start cursing people out. I know when I feel ashamed, I start going off on people and I start projecting my stuff onto other people. Or when I feel insecure in a relationship, I start sabotaging or pulling back, those kinds of things. So if I recognize that those are patterns of mine, then I can decide how I want to show up differently. And so they're categorized in that way. And then we have some blank cards so that you can actually come up with things that you want to do on your own, or things that you want to work with on your own. What I think is so cool about this is that we also have a glossary for commonly used words throughout the deck, so that people can feel like, what do you mean when you say be effective? Like, what do you mean when you say guilt? How do you even define that? So I have glossaries that are included in here. Wow. And then because I grew up in a house where I wasn't kind of given space to actually name and list emotions, I struggled with that even as an adult. And I didn't learn how to put language to emotions until I became a therapist and psychologist, like all through training, right? And that was the way that I learned to talk about emotions. And everybody doesn't have that space or privilege to be able to go to school and learn about all of this stuff, right? Or even want to. So I put an emotion wheel in here so that people can identify kind of like which emotion they're feeling and go to the wheel and kind of identify those basic emotions. And these are primary emotions and some secondary emotions on here. So when I feel afraid, I feel guilty, I feel sad, I feel excited, those kinds of things. And then there's a resource card in case you're somebody who's working on them and you start to feel really wound up. You can go here, like scan the little QR code, or go to the website and actually find resources on my website to find a therapist in your area. So I really think it's a helpful resource to have so that people can feel like I can work through these. And these are cards now listen, I tried to do this with my partner and we can only get through 2. So I would tell people do maybe 1 or 2 a day, maybe sit on it for a couple days and then do it again, because you don't go to therapy every day. So you don't want to be doing these cards so much that you're taxing yourself. So you can do it by yourself. You can do it in a group. You can do it for girls' night. You can do it on a couples trip. You can do all, like, you can work by yourself or you can work in conjunction with somebody. You can do it with your therapist. But I even couldn't get through these, and I created these with my partner. I couldn't even get through 2 of them. I was like, you know what? Let's just stop. Just cut it out. You know, because it brings up stuff like you're having really genuine conversation. I would urge people to do this with people who they actually feel comfortable with and people who can actually hold space for their response. Because if you're gonna tell somebody, well, when I feel ashamed, I go through your phone, or when I feel insecure, I actually go through your phone, and people are gonna get mad at you and ridicule you for that, you're not gonna want to be open with them any further. So make sure it's with somebody who can hear you and you can hear them, and y'all can kind of work through it together. That's the whole point of it, is to do your work so that you can get better, not do your work so you can feel further ashamed.
One thing I like about these cards is that you're giving them something to think about and also telling them to take action.
Yeah, take action. Yeah.
You know, because that's one thing that, coming from somebody who myself has struggled with their mental health for several years, whenever I've taken action, like whether it's taking a walk, you know, playing with my doggy, that helps to change my mindset, instead of kind of like, I call it the gerbil wheel of shame. That is literally what I call it. Instead of sitting in that gerbil wheel going around in circles, you know, stuck in the past. It's always the past.
It's always the past. And I tell people, most of our issues come from either worrying about the past or planning for the future. Most of our anxiety and depression is not present based. It's living in one of those 2 spaces, or I'm worried about something that happened to me. I'm thinking about something that happened to me, trying to make it make sense, or I'm worried about something in the future, trying to make sure that I don't let that thing happen to me again. And so I'm sitting there kind of in both of those spaces. And typically when we sit in the present moment, everything is typically fine. My dog is here. My cat is here. Yeah, my bills are due, but my bills are due tomorrow. That's in the future. Yeah, my water, you know, got cut off. That was yesterday. We're kind of here today. You got water. People brought you water. We're kind of like doing fine. I always tell people, like, right now, at this very second, at this very moment, we are typically okay. At this very moment right here, we're typically okay. And I try to, you know, use that to bring people back to center, so that we can see in a way to ground ourselves and actually bring ourselves back to focus, so that we can actually manage our emotions and get back to baseline, basically.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I noticed about myself. And it took me a long time to get to this point of understanding.
Yeah.
Like,
well, when you've experienced trauma, Portia, it is very difficult to sit in the moment. Like, trauma is anything that significantly disrupts your life. I worked on an internship before where I called these people the gatekeepers. They were my supervisors, but I called them the gatekeepers of PTSD. And I worked with veterans, and they would tell me that the veterans weren't actually experiencing PTSD like they thought they were. They were actually just trying to be compensated. They weren't really that bad off. And I was like, even at that point, I knew that you don't get a chance to tell somebody what trauma they experienced. You don't get a chance to tell somebody how significant something disrupted their life. You don't get to say how that's impacting their current life. And they did. And they were like, well, you know, and I was doing ratings. I was doing like compensation ratings for these veterans. And they would say, well, they're just trying to get money. And it was super invalidating for these Black men who had already experienced so much in these conflicts, these wars in the military, in that system, for them to then come to the VA by white supervisors to tell me, a Black woman working with these men, that they're just over exaggerating. And that's where the strong Black person comes in, that like, oh, they can deal with it. They're fine. But white people are seen as way more fragile than Black people. And so, oh yeah, they definitely have PTSD that totally disrupted their life. But Black people aren't allowed to have the same experience. And so what I learned from that experience is that you really don't get to define a traumatic event for somebody. So the way that I define trauma is any event that significantly disrupted the course of your life. And that can be anything. And I will even tell you, the field of mental health, we have a long way to go, because even the field of mental health qualified trauma as having to meet a certain number of criteria. Like they would even say, oh, that's not trauma, that's tragedy. Like you really don't get a chance to tell somebody what's traumatic to them. And these are the issues that we have within the field of mental health.
Wow.
That kind of teasing apart. And this is how you gatekeep kind of like people's experiences. And it invalidates a lot of our experiences. And so I'm really passionate about, doing my work to help marginalized groups feel seen in the field of mental health. And that requires decolonizing mental health and saying, no, that's trauma. Even if it doesn't fit this criteria in the DSM, that is trauma. That significantly impacted your life. And you have struggled with it. And so as you talk about being present, it's really hard to be present centered when you're operating out of survival mode. Mm-hmm. And you're just trying to survive and make sure that thing doesn't happen again. And without the skills, because I mean, where do many of us learn how to regulate our emotions? Without the skills, you never move out of survival mode. You're always operating in survival mode. And that is what the habits card get at. Is like, okay, they helped you survive when you were 17. Are these really helpful now that you're 37 in this safe environment, in this relationship that is healthy, those kinds of things. And so getting us to kind of draw a connection between when it was helpful, when it's not helpful, and those kinds of things. And so that you can bring your body back down, begin to understand and regulate your emotions from a place of effectiveness versus just kind of operating out of survival all the time.
Absolutely. You touched on a lot, especially like you said, understanding and learning. That takes time. That takes a lot of discovery of self. And I had to learn that for the past couple years in order to, like I said, be open about my mental health struggles like I have been for the past year. So we're discussing my therapy card. So she's going to ask me one of the therapy cards and I'm going to answer as best as I can, depending on what the question is. So be prepared, everybody.
Okay, you ready?
Yes, I am. Ready like SpongeBob.
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about the habit cards. The habit cards are designed to guide you through exploring what your habit blocks are that may be getting in the way of you reaching your fullest potential, okay?
All right.
So which situations lead to you engaging in old, ineffective habits?
Which situations lead you to engage in old, ineffective habits?
And ineffective being defined as those things that don't work for you.
I would say for me, when I start to get depressed about past things, for example, my love life. My love life has been, lack of a better word, a crap show. Mm-hmm. I've been single for 7 years. And I find myself at times texting old exes just to have that conversation of just being wanted and feeling important, even though I know that it's not conducive. I know that there's really no purpose for it. I just want to feel that lost love, that lost emotion that I haven't felt in 7 years. And even though the conversations are very dead, like I don't ask questions of, do you miss me? Like, do you think about me on this day? Like, I don't ask any of that stuff. It's more so I just have generic conversations of, oh, how's life? This is what I'm doing, that kind of thing. But even still, it's not healthy to do that.
And why would you say it's not healthy? Why is it not working for you? Why would you say it's ineffective?
It's ineffective because we're not getting back together. The emotion is dead. The history that we had is there. It's back in the past. We're different people now. We've evolved. We're on to different careers. Some of us have kids. Like I don't have any kids. I still feel like, even though I'm 28, I still feel like I'm 18. Yeah. But nothing, not a whole lot has changed in my life in that time frame outside of career, school finish, traveled, around the world and, lived in a different state, but nothing big and significant.
Mm-hmm. That's really insightful. One thing that I would just kind of go a little step further to ask is, how does that keep you stuck though? So I do think that there's a purpose to doing that, because you said it helps me feel seen. It helps me feel wanted. It helps me feel those feelings again, that nostalgia, right? So we don't do things that don't serve us. However, it may not be effective for us. So it may keep me stuck. So how do texting your exes kind of keep you stuck and moving forward to your highest self?
It keeps me stuck because I miss them. I miss what we had.
Yeah.
And then it also makes it hard to date other people who are different than them.
That's it. So it's hard to move past it, right? When you are still connected to them. And so one of the ways that it shows up being ineffective is it doesn't allow me to then effectively date because I'm still holding on to what we had there. And I'm not allowing myself to kind of be flexible in what the new dating could bring.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. We want to do one more. These are fun.
Yeah.
Can we do one more?
So we can do one more. So what do you have? So you'll tell me after we do one more. So do you want to do a trigger or do you want to do a mindset one?
I guess I can tough a trigger one. I can tough
a trigger one. Okay. Let's see. Have to choose a good one. Triggers are designed to guide you through exploring those ineffective ways that you're responding to emotional triggers. Okay. Ooh. This is a good one since we're talking about relationships.
Oh, man.
Finish this sentence. When I feel fear in a relationship with others, I blank.
When I feel fear in a relationship with others, I tend to withdraw. I withdraw a lot. Like I'll kind of go somewhat ghost on them. And ghost meaning like I won't text them for a couple days. Or if we're used to talking every day, I won't text them at all. I'll, wait until they message me. What else do I do? I kind of fall into that gerbil wheel of shame because, it's that boat of uncertainty, right? You're kind of walking on the pins and needles because you don't know. But see, I'm very self-aware and I also am very good with reading people. And so sometimes my fear comes because I don't want to accept something that I know is true. Like I'm very good at picking up when people are lying to me.
Yeah. So here's the second part to that question, because remember there's a prompt at the top and then there's a task at the bottom.
Okay.
So the task says, is this fear response a form of projection? Like, are you projecting things onto somebody, your own stuff onto somebody else or that other person who you feel fear with?
Am I projecting?
So I'll take your, while you think about that. So if I feel like if I'm really good at lying, right, and I have a history of people lying to me, right, and I'm used to people lying, so I'm also ready for you to lie to me. So anything that you say, I'm looking for my lie radar to go off. But that's my stuff coming up. So I'm looking to catch you in a lie. So that's what I mean by, are you projecting your past stuff onto them? And is that adding to the fear response or adding to the way that you respond, or the fear response and adding to the ways that you pull back or kind of look for the things that may be going wrong, or the fear that, or the lies that may be coming up?
I would say I do, because like you said, when you've experienced trauma, your defenses go up.
Yes.
And I know that I do that a lot. But most of the time, 95% of the time, I end up being right.
You end up being right, right? And so how does that serve you in relationships? Like, how is that working? Does that work for you? Does that keep you stuck in like kind of growing in the area of relationships? Does that kind of thing stand in the way of you building meaningful relationships, even with yourself and with other people? Like trusting them and then trusting yourself.
I would say I'm still working through some trust issues, big time. Because like I said, when you've been burned several times, you just don't want to be bothered.
Yeah, absolutely. And that not wanting to be bothered is one of the things that keep us stuck, right? And then that idea of, well, you said when I talk to you online, like let's take dating apps, right? When I talk to you online and I'm trying to get myself back to dating, you said you had 2 sisters and really you just have one. You're out, right? Like we're not putting up with anything anymore, right? And so like any little thing, and it keeps us stuck because we're not willing to be flexible. And I'm not saying you just have to kind of like take whatever people give you, but as an example, we're really just kind of rigid in the ways that we kind of progress and kind of move into relationships. Any little thing that is a sign of a lie, we equate that to you're going to hurt me. I'm not going for it. You're out. Versus hearing people out. And that's the way that we kind of keep ourselves kind of stuck sometimes.
Yeah. And that's true. I mean, that's why I've been riding solo for like, 7 years. But at the same time, I feel like it's been a good thing though.
Yeah.
Because I've taken more time to invest in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Something that as a Black woman, I've neglected.
Right.
So I guess we may as well ask a mindset one.
Ask a mindset one. I can talk about these things all day. I'm not gonna give them all away though, but I can talk about them all day. So let's do a mindset one.
Yeah, let's.
Ooh, I like that one. Let's see. Do I want to ask that one? I think that's a little too personal. Okay, which self-limiting thoughts do you have that keep getting in your way?
Self-limiting thoughts that keep getting in my way. My common one is that I'm not good enough.
I love that one. Yeah.
That one, and it seems that this same freaking phrase keeps popping up.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a woman thing. I don't know if it's because I'm an African American woman and the stigma of being a strong Black woman is there. And it's like, I've been trying to figure out, how do you work around this?
Yeah. So I'm not good enough is a common, I call them core beliefs, right? It's a common core belief, and it's centered around so many things, right? So let's just take being a Black woman, right? What is our image of good enough in this world as it relates to being a Black woman? Certainly, we got colorism that plays in there. If you're a Black woman, you're good enough. If you're lighter skinned, you're good enough if you have hair that is straight down your back. You're good enough if you're thin. So the closer we are historically to those ideals, then that makes us good enough, right? If we're definitely weight is an issue. Also, if you think about trauma, if many of us who've experienced, if you've experienced trauma when you were younger, why did this happen to me? One of my things is my dad left us when I was out in the 5th grade, and I thought it was about us as kids, like he didn't want to be with us. So what makes us not good enough that he wants to stay with us? Like that thought comes into mind, because here's what the brain does. The brain does not like incomplete pictures or puzzles. The brain likes to fill in the holes in the puzzle. Even if the puzzle piece doesn't fit, it likes to see a complete picture. You know how sometimes you can get a puzzle piece and be like, it doesn't fit, but I'm gonna make it fit. That's what the brain does, just so we can get a complete picture. And the only people we have, or the only thing we have access to that's going to fill in a puzzle is us. We can't make sense about why somebody else did something. So why did they assault me? I don't know what their motives were. Why did my dad leave? I don't know. And so as we're trying to fill in the puzzle, we have all these empty holes. We're like, oh, so it must be me. And so we begin to plug in the puzzle pieces to fill in those spaces. And filling in those spaces gives us a sense of control. As crazy as it sounds, when we know why something happened, we can control it. When we don't know why something happened, we can't control it. So if I know that it was me as the reason my dad left, then I know that I can do something about people leaving me in the future. So that way, I need to be good enough. And how do I be good enough? I make people happy, because I get praised when I do that. People are happy with me. People want to be me. So then I turn into a people pleaser. And then I kind of like neglect my own needs, my own limits, my own boundaries. Because what? I want people to like me, because if people like me, then they don't what? They don't leave me. And so all of that begins to kind of be the way that I protect myself against all of those things happening. And then all of that becomes equated with me being good enough. So yes, he told you they're here, I'm good enough. And then when we're left, when we're kind of like rejected, I wasn't good enough. Or then, when we see somebody who looks different than us, we compare ourselves against them. So all of these things that we do reinforces this core belief that we're not good enough. And so we keep letting that play, and that thing plays all the time through our many different contexts, and it's just strengthened. It's just strengthened. It's just strengthened. And so if we even think about, like, let's take this interview, right? Or people you've reached out to for interviews. If they've turned you down, that's rejection. But you heard them on another podcast, the thing that you immediately go to because you can't make sense of it is, oh, my show wasn't good enough. I'm not good enough. They didn't see that value in me. And so we're always trying to fill in puzzle pieces, but we're trying to fill it in with the information that we have. And that core belief, I'm not good enough, always tends to resurface. I'm not good enough. And that shame and guilt that comes with it, that rejection, that depression tends to come with it. And many of us, what I do in therapy is I ask people is like, when was the first time you ever felt not good enough? Can you remember what that experience was? And then some people may say, I remember, when my dad left, or I remember when, somebody did something to me and then I was told that I made it happen. I shouldn't have worn a skirt or whatever, so it could be any of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you from my experience, I'm also a product of a single parent household,
Mm-hmm.
And even though my biological father, every once in a while, he'll, I guess, reach out from under the rock that
Right.
Patrick is residing in just to
Right.
say hi. But it's like, I'm 28. Where were you?
Right.
When I really needed you,
Right.
So
right.
That's a very, very interesting concept. Very interesting.
And you'd be surprised. A lot of the work that I end up doing with people is around that very core belief of not being good enough.
Wow.
Not being good enough. Black women. Like, I think it's a historical thing. I think that we've been kind of looked at as not good enough just in this world. Outside of the own things that we think about ourselves from our own experiences, many of us just in this world, as we show up, we don't see representation on TV of ourselves. We don't see a lot of it in magazines. And so if they're in magazines and I'm not, what does that mean about me? And so then you start to have these ideals and these internalized ideals about what beauty is, about what good enough looks like. And if we don't match that, then of course we're strengthening that idea that we're not good enough. And that continues to bring about the shame and that guilt when we compare ourselves to other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Well, thank you, Dr. Ebony, for joining me remotely today out of your busy day.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you, especially for using the cards today. So if one of our listeners was interested in purchasing, a deck of cards, where can they go to find them, Dr. Ebony?
Yes, you can go to mytherapycards.com. And you can also go to drebony.com. I have a tab that runs across the top of my website that has a link to the My Therapy Cards website. And if you have a question about it, you can either email me at info, I-N-F-O, at drebony.com, or you can find me on Instagram. I'm always over there. Dr. Ebony online, and you can send me a DM, and I'm happy to answer questions. I'm also on LinkedIn and trying to do better about my presence there. But I'm Ebony Butler, PhD on LinkedIn. And so I'm easy to find. I'm easy to talk to. So if you have a question, I'm happy to answer. And when you purchase the cards, you get invited into a Facebook group so that we can have conversation around how to use the card and what things are coming up for people. Like, we got to that fear card that we did. And if people are talking about, well, this projection sentence really doesn't make sense, how would I use that, or what questions would I ask somebody if that, we use that card in session, or I use it by myself, then we can have a discussion in that group around some other questions that could get at digging at more, kind of like what we did here, because I'm not at everybody's house. And so the Facebook group serves to kind of like help us have conversation around what other follow-up questions we can ask.
Absolutely. Well, that's great, Dr. Ebony. I'm definitely ready to purchase mine so I can use these. I mean, I think that they're not only just helpful for the purchaser, but also if they have, if they are currently enrolled in therapy, maybe they can, use them during their sessions with their therapist to kind of like create a relationship if they're kind of like, a little rocky. So we're going to be running out of time here shortly, okay. Dr. Ebony. What advice can you leave with our listeners today?
I would tell your listeners to definitely choose to be gentle with themselves, be compassionate, because I think that we have learned and have been conditioned to be really hard on ourselves. And we are so critical of ourselves that if we offer ourselves just a little bit of compassion, we can offer in some flexibility. We can offer in some space for us to be able to grow and change, and that we can definitely decrease some of that guilt and shame that really sits heavy on many of us. It keeps us stuck. So be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, especially during these times, because we all need it.
Absolutely, you're definitely right, and I don't think that what we're currently going through is gonna just fizzle out, tomorrow, next week.
We're in this thing. We're in it. Like, we're in it for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the whole COVID thing. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just like, oh, like
Yeah.
any day now. I mean,
Yeah.
because for the rest of the summer, I am quarantined. Like,
Yeah.
no social, nothing. Like,
Nothing. Summer is canceled.
I'm glad somebody else said it. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it.
We better figure out how to get real creative in this house with summer, because there's a lot of people getting sick. There's a lot of like risks, and I think there's some things that we can go out and do. I joke when I say cancel because I know people are bored, but I think we really need to take this serious in that we really need to be healthy and protect ourselves. It's not going anywhere, and then we come right back up on flu season. And it's, we have got to stay vigilant and safe, and be real cautious and wear your mask. I know some people feel like that's a political statement, but wear your mask.